Dr. David Clark.
Mr. Speaker, I can understand why that member only wants to take a short call on this bill. The government is on the back foot here. It's defending its decision to pay for a convention centre off the backs of problem gamblers. And the excuses that come out, are not fooling New Zealanders. New Zealanders don't want a convention centre funded off the back of problem gambling. And John Key, of course, is up to his eyeballs in this deal. And no doubt the members opposite have been instructed to keep this debate as short as they can, because it's a pretty uncomfortable place for the Prime Minister to be. It was all kicked off over dinner with the Sky City executives, and we know that he said at that dinner that we discussed a possible national convention centre, and they raised issues relating to the Gambling Act 2003. Mr. Smith is claiming that by quoting the Prime Minister, I'm in the gutter, and I find that deeply ironic, because it's his Prime Minister across there that is in this dirty deal up to his eyeballs. He told officials to cancel their business case study and close off the Sky City options. His ministers and officials repeatedly met with Sky City while holding off other tenderers. No one but Sky City was ever going to secure this deal. This is a deal done in a way that was not transparent, and New Zealand businesses across the country are looking to this government and asking why. New Zealand businesses are sick of a government that deals with its mates where the playing field is not level. The Deputy Auditor General investigated this deal, and even before the report was released, the Prime Minister, John Key, was telling everyone he had been cleared and was, quote, totally vindicated. He was. But it wasn't true. Yes, it was. Where did you get into comedy? The Deputy Auditor General, Philippa Smith, said at the Select Committee that her report established deficiencies on the part of both ministers and officials. And if Mr. Smith wants to claim that that is totally vindicated, that is very revealing about his view about what constitutes vindication. When the Auditor General says that this is a dirty deal, not transparent or even-handed, flawed was the word the Auditor General used, flawed, not even-handed or transparent. Quote, Mr. Smith, that is not total vindication on this side of the House. It may be on that side of the House. I think that reveals more about the values on that side of the House. So, Mr. Speaker, this deal lines up with other deals we've heard about. This casino deal with the Warner Brothers deal, the MediaWorks deal, the Rio Tinto deal, handing over $30 million without even asking for a jobs guarantee. And then we see... Oh, that's not true, Mr. Smith. We know it's not true because Rio Tinto, for example, started restructuring the very next day. The very next day. There was no jobs guarantee. Bill English said he didn't even ask for any kind of jobs guarantee. And Chorus is up next, of course. We'll see. This government will go on doing deals for as long as it's here and as long as it can. Jonathan Young I found interesting in his contribution to this third reading, where he referred to one or two submitters who were in support, and they were certainly a minority around that table. Jonathan Young, as the Select Committee Chair, along with the other National MPs, blocked officials coming in to give further evidence on health consequences. He blocked the Treasury coming in, he blocked the Internal Affairs Department coming in, he blocked the Problem Gambling Foundation coming in, and the members of Parliament who requested additional information were frustrated by the national members of Parliament who did not wish for further evidence on the problems and harms that will be caused by this bill because they simply did not want to know about it. The Tourism Association was one of the few who presented in favour of this bill, but they were pretty nervous and they trod a very careful line. And I suspect that was in part because when they were asked whether gambling harm was the best way of paying for this, they were uncomfortable, didn't want to answer that question. And in part because across the industry there is a mix of consequences. We know from the NZIER, from their independent report, that just 18 net jobs will be created across the economy. And that is because there will be a few jobs created in Auckland, but they'll be sucked out of places like Taupo. So Louise Upston across there will have to answer to her constituents as to why the convention business is down in Taupo. And it's a direct result of this bill. It's a direct result of this bill that the National MPs are behind. Todd McClay will have to answer why business for conferences is down in Rotorua. David Bennett will have to answer why business for conferences is down in Hamilton. And it's because this is a convention centre that will draw business from elsewhere in the country. That is why there's only 18 net jobs created, because businesses are being sucked out of the regions from a government that is neglecting these regions. And that is not atypical. It's all about Auckland and Christchurch, and even they, because of the government's reluctance to tackle the big issues, are struggling, but other places are struggling more, and the government does not seem to care. Mr. Speaker, we know that a convention centre may not be a bad idea in and of itself, but nobody thinks paying for it by problem gambling is the answer. It's a bad deal for all New Zealanders. Government originally tried to sell this as an economic development initiative. I think that NZIER report has embarrassed them. There is no doubt just 18 net jobs across the economy. And the reason the deal is so bad, of course, is because the government put itself over a barrel. It did it itself. It shut down the process to competitive bidders. It got rid of transparency. It said we need to get the deal done because we've put our political futures on the line here, and that's where the government found itself. And of course, Sky City, they're not stupid. They're smart business people. They said, we've got an opportunity here. The government's put itself over a barrel. Let's write our own blank cheque. And so they proceeded to. The government very hastily dropped all of the things that would have been good for New Zealanders in terms of covering off the risks of problem gambling. They decided not to write any of that stuff into law. It's there in the loosest of forms. None of the measures that the national members have been crowing about are actually written in the legislation. They got rid of the clauses in the original negotiating documents that would have allowed the New Zealand government to claw back lost GDP if the centre wasn't run properly. They got rid of the clauses that said that the New Zealand taxpayer could have got back lost tax revenue if the centre wasn't run properly. The Sky City people were having a field day. They said, we don't like this clause, we don't like that clause. Strike them out. Put one in. In fact, put one in that says if gambling laws change, we'll see the upside, no matter which way they change. And two clauses were drafted to make sure that that would play either way. Sky City have got a fantastic deal out of that. And there's no doubt about that. Of course, a professor of marketing at Bond University in Queensland, a friend of the chief executive, Nigel Morrison, who has worked as a consultant on casinos on 5 continents, he says the deal was a clear win for Sky City. He said, he's a friend, but if you want to quote me, you can say Morrison did an excellent job negotiating with authorities. The 27-year licence extension is labelled icing on the cake. So Sky City gets 230 poking machines and an extension on its licence until 2048 in return for building the International Convention Centre. But even if you put the horrors of problem gambling to one side, comparison with any overseas valuation tells you that the taxpayers of New Zealand have been shortchanged. The Treasury were absolutely spot on when they said the public costs will flow to private gain once the centre is paid off. And of course there may be worse to come. The negotiations are not over. If the initial proposal exceeds $402 million, there's a special clause in the agreement that allows the government to hand over more cash to Sky City. More cash. And that's going to be negotiated when? In election year. So taxpayers, watch out. The government's left itself open to close off this deal, to put more money Sky City's way. It's already one of the worst deals in Australasian history, and this government is trying to save its own political skin with it. But in the meantime, ordinary New Zealanders are looking on and saying, this is one deal too far. This is a Prime Minister who's riding roughshod over the law, over transparent process. We're sick of it. They're getting sick of this government. They're getting sick of the deals with the big end of town. And ordinary New Zealanders are saying, this is enough. This agreement should not go ahead. These people can and must be stopped. And that is why the national government is falling out of favour with New Zealanders. That is why people are looking elsewhere for political leadership. That is why the people on the street are stopping me and saying we can't wait for a Labour-led government, because ordinary New Zealanders are sick of a government whose hands are off the wheel, who are doing dirty deals and abandoning ordinary New Zealanders.
Honourable Phil Heatley.
Mr Speaker, for years the tourism industry and the business sector have been